getting to the last mile is really difficult, and there's different challenges for urban and rural. And Rob, that was one of the things you spoke of on this panel here at the Fiber Connect conference. Why don't you, as part of Altafiber, why don't you kind of give us the distinction you see between serving urban areas and rural areas? And we'll have a kind of a free-flowing conversation here.
Sure. So, I mean, at the end of the day, urban has more density, right? So at the end of the day, that dense area is going to be a lot easier to serve than the rural area, which is, has fewer homes per mile. And so the costs just outweigh, the areas. So what you try to do is create a hybrid of both, right? Where you have some urban pockets and then you find some rural pockets and you kind of mix them together, right? So it makes it economically feasible to serve both markets. We're obviously seeing subsidy come into play, right, for the rural markets as well. At the end of the day, even maybe with the combination of urban and rural, you still have that gap where you need some funding to help, and that's where the federal, state, and local funding has been coming into play as broadband's getting deployed further and further after COVID, is through that type of funding where you're looking for that gap funding and how do you fill that gap.
Well, I like the blended blender model. Is that what you called it?
Yeah, the blender theory. I mean, at the end of the day, the blender theory is you have some homes that if you're a business, you're going to be able to serve those homes. You're going to be able to make the business case to serve those homes. But there's going to be other homes that are next to those homes that the business case just isn't there, right? So if you take all of them and you mix them together, that amount of funding that you need to serve those homes is going to decrease, right? Because at the end of the day, the business case homes can stand alone. And then when you mix them in with the homes that need a little bit of funding, need funding, you can take less funding because of the good homes that help you with the business case.
Well, and that is very important because some of the BEAD money is going to require equity to be in there. And so the more you can bring to that, it helps stretch the limited BEAD funds, right?
At the end of the day, BEAD funding is going to require 25% match at least, right, at a minimum. In the state of Ohio, I like to talk about Ohio because that's where our main operations are. When you look at them, they get about $860 million in BEAD, but when you're talking to them, it's going to take about $1.4 billion to serve every home, right? So that's the importance of BEAD, right? At the end of the day, the state of Ohio has to check the box. We serve everybody with 100 by 20 service, right? So they're not going to be able to do that with $860 million. They're going to need probably around $1.4 billion. And that's where the equity and the partnerships come with the state, where ISPs are going to have to put in some of their own funding and have some of their own skin in the game to serve these homes.
Altafiber is formerly known as the ISP known as Cincinnati Bell, right?
Right.
As an ISP serving a very urban area, you have that, but you also have a lot of rural areas. So that's, you talked about kind of these rural areas maybe being more about economic development, and in urban areas it's more about getting people educated about how to use it. Why don't you talk to that?
Altafiber, formerly Cincinnati Bell, has a subdivision called UniCity. And UniCity comes at the digital equity equation a little bit differently, whether if you're in an urban area or if you're in a rural area. When you're in an urban area, digital equity is about education, right? It's about healthcare. It's about all of those things. It's about partnering with local institutions, nonprofit institutions, to provide the broadband service and the education that goes behind it. UniCity comes in and goes into housing projects and areas where equity is an issue, and provides the high-speed internet. And then you backfill that with local community resources that help train, educate, and make people aware of what the broadband can do for them. When you're in rural areas where, downtown's a main street and there's not much else there, UniCity kind of changes the format there and becomes more of, while it's digital equity, it's more about economic development, right? And what can they learn about that town? Who's coming there? Who's shopping there? Is it people from the town, or is it the people from the next town over? How often do they come? Do they come once a week? Do they come 2 times a week? It's a bunch. UniCity pulls a bunch of data for them, right? That they can use that data to do a better model for economic development. And so, to your point, in an urban area, it's more about education and availability, and in a rural area, it's more about economic development.
When as you're talking to communities about partnering with them, then is that part of what you bring to the table to help them understand why they need this?
Absolutely. I think the first thing when you talk about partnering with communities, try to understand what they're looking to solve, right? What's the problem they're trying to solve? Is it just because Sally Smith calls them, every day and says, hey, I don't have my internet doesn't work, and they just want that phone call to stop? Or are they looking to try and future-proof their city, right? Or town or community? And once you go through those questions and you look at them and you say, okay, hey, at the end of the day, you're trying to solve for X. We come in and try and figure out, okay, how do you solve for X? What does that mean? How do we partner? What's the next steps?
And then one of the things you brought up was the question of the other kind of equity, and that's private equity. And you made the distinction between years past and today's equity environment.
Well, I think there's just lots of different folks that invest in the broadband market, and there's a couple clear ones, right? At the end of the day, there's a group of equity that are looking to and they're both great. It's just a matter of how they approach the business. Some equity approaches the business in that they want to try and get by, past as many homes as possible, and it's not really a long-term investment. They're looking to flip that investment within, 3 to 5 years. They're looking to get past as many homes as possible and then sell the organization. The other type of equity is more infrastructure based, right? And so they take a longer term approach at investment in broadband. And so their their flip is from 7 to 10 years. So they're actually trying to build the business, right? It's not just about passing homes, it's about building the business. And so their investment is just a little bit longer because they're growing a business and not just passing homes.
Well, and that's Altafiber's, right? New ownership.
Yeah, Macquarie Asset Management out of Australia is the current owner of Altafiber, and they're an infrastructure firm, right? That's what they do. They build bridges, they build roads, they build dams, and they take that approach towards our business as well, right? So when they're building those types of entities, it's a long-term approach. And it's the same thing with Altafiber. They're, made a long-term investment into expanding Altafiber's business. It's not just about passing homes, it's about expanding and building the business.
Excellent. It's all based on fiber.
All based on fiber.
Fiber is the driver, as you said it. Well, Rob,
Exactly.
It's great catching up with you.
Nice talking to you, Ken, always.
Thanks.
Take care.